Welcome to the Books Read Thrive podcast. I'm your host, Guy McPherson. Each week, we're going to be celebrating the books that help us grow, heal, and thrive, and talking to the incredible authors who write them. Books have the amazing power to change our lives. They've certainly changed mine, and I know they can change yours too. Thank you for being here, and get ready to change your life. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, Danny. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Danny Gregory. Danny, welcome.
Well, glad to be here.
Awesome. So Danny Gregory is the internationally best-selling author of a dozen books on art and creativity. He's founder of Sketchbook Skool, that's school, S-K-O-O-L, with tens of thousands of students worldwide, and has shown zillions of people how to ignite their inner artists, embrace their creativity, and tell the stories of their lives. From Boston to Beijing, people who haven't drawn since grade school have picked up the creative habit and have gone on to publish books of their own and show and sell their artwork. Sketchbook Skool, an online art school designed to bring artists back to their creativity, taught by the world's best illustrators, artists, and educators. It encourages its global community of over 50,000 students to draw in a sketchbook regardless of skill level. Danny, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
So before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I was born in England and I came to Brooklyn when I was 12. And now I live in Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow. Interesting. England?
Yeah, I grew up all around the world. I grew up in Australia, Pakistan, Israel, and Pittsburgh and Brooklyn. So.
Wow. So, all right, let's go. How did this passion in creativity begin for you?
You know, I think I always was creative. I loved to make stuff when I was a little kid, as I think all little kids do. And then when I got into high school, you know, I did stuff in high school. I was editor of the school paper. I was in plays. I edited an underground magazine with my friends. I painted. I just did various stuff. But when it came to time to go to college, I had to get serious. And so I went to Princeton and I became a political science major. And yeah, I kind of thought like that, I don't know, would guarantee some sort of adult security or something. So I studied political science. I was a White House intern. But I quickly learned I didn't want to be a journalist. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be an academic. I learned a lot of things I didn't want to be by being exposed to them. So then I graduated from college and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to be. I just knew what I kind of probably didn't want to be. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like a lot of people who don't know what they want to be when they grow up, I ended up in advertising. And I spent 30 years working in advertising. I was a creative director for a bunch of agencies and worked on a lot of stuff. And I enjoyed it. It was an interesting way of using my creativity. It was about problem solving. It was in ways I could sneak in personal creative expression into it, mm-hmm. which wouldn't seem obvious when you're writing a commercial. But I wrote a lot of commercials about my life and my experiences and my point of view. And I kind of did sort of various things to sneak them into commercials for American Express or IBM or Chase and things like that. And then, but on the side, I was definitely frustrated creatively. And I think a lot of the stuff that I've written about in ensuing years was about this sense that I have that there are a lot of people like me who feel creative deep down, but they're afraid to do a lot of things. And they might be afraid to go all the way to, I'm going to go to art school and become a painter, but they might also just be afraid to even do a bit of drawing on the weekends or buy a sketchbook. Yeah, because we have all this stuff tied up with being artists and all these fears that society puts on us that says basically you'll ruin your life if you go there. And then that kind of extends to a fear of and an intensely hypercritical judgment that we make about anything that we do that comes close to being creative. And obviously, there's a lot of people who don't feel this way, but I know I did, and I've discovered that there's a lot of other people that way too. They need permission. They need to know that it's okay to do this. And there was nobody who ever told me that it was okay. Certainly, my family never said, "Don't dare become an artist." I mean, it just wasn't really something that they talked about or encouraged, and I didn't have role models around that either. And I've met a lot of people who grew up in families that were actively campaigning against the idea that you would become an artist or an actor or a dancer or anything like that. And then I think also in our society in general, we tie creativity so much to economics, right? Mm-hmm. That you're not really an artist unless you're selling, and you have to be selling at a certain level. And I mean, honestly, there's 500, 1,000 top artists who make a great living in this country. I mean, it's not a common career path. It's not in some ways, I guess it's not a realistic goal, but that doesn't mean that you can't make art. And I think that that's what I've tried to do, is to separate the two things and say, making art doesn't have to be your job, but you can still do it, and you can still enjoy it, and it can still be profitable to you in the sense that it can provide all kinds of benefits.
Let me interject, if I may. So
sure.
When you were younger, when you were in high school, you were creative, you said, at a younger age, and you got into Princeton. People don't just get into Princeton. You're kind of on this academic track, right? You're thinking, okay, at that time on the runway to Princeton, were you also being creative? Were you suppressing it, or where was the creativity within that time frame for you?
I mean, this will sound odd, but I didn't really intend to go to Princeton. I didn't have any particular ambitions. As I said, I didn't grow up in America, so I didn't have a full understanding of even what that was all about, going to an Ivy League school. But I was creative. I mean, I was in plays, and I was, as I said, editor of the paper, and I was writing essays, and I was doing all kinds of things. I was definitely being creative as a high school student, but that didn't necessarily mean that I had to become a creative professional.
Mm-hmm. And when you went to, went into advertising, what was going on for you cognitively, where you decided, okay, I'm gonna get into advertising? I'm not gonna pursue my creativity. I'm not gonna be an artist, or sounds like there was kind of a proverbial fork in the road for you, maybe.
There was actually a mother in the road. My mother said, you have to get out of the house by the end of the summer. So that's kind of what it came down to: get a job. And I was living in New York City, which was a lot less expensive back in those days, but it was still an expensive place to live. So I had to get some kind of a professional job. And, I kind of scrambled around, and people said to me, like, you seem like you could be a creative guy in advertising. And I didn't really know anybody who was that, but I ended up deciding to make that my goal. And I literally wrote letters to all of the CEOs of every major advertising agency in New York. And I wrote to them and basically said, well, you're lucky I'm available. And surprisingly, I mean, maybe it's because it was so over the top, I ended up getting like a bunch of conversations that turned into interviews, and I did get a job, and I got out of the house at the end of the summer. So it kind of worked. And then I was just doing that, and I was making good money and increasingly better money. And I was having fun and interesting experiences. So I just kept doing it. But it was, I think like a lot of the decisions in my life, I didn't really make it. It sort of was the universe thrust it upon me in some way.
And at what point did you kind of jump off the
advertising
path? Yeah.
Well, there's another thing that happened in the middle, which I'll take us a couple minutes to tell you about. So, as I said, I was doing well. I got married, and I had my wife was pregnant with our son, and everything seemed to be going well. Like I achieved a lot of great things. It seemed to me, I had a really nice situation, and then when my son was 9 months old, my wife was going to work and she fell off the platform on the subway and fell onto the tracks, and she was run over by a subway train.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, and she wasn't killed, but she was paralyzed. She was left paraplegic, and she was in a wheelchair for the rest of her life.
My Lord.
So, yeah, so I was at a photo shoot, and suddenly the police came to get me, and within, a minute, my life was completely changed, as of course my wife's was. And so we had to kind of rethink everything. And for me, as a person who really thought that I was on the path and, everything was working for me, this threw me into a completely topsy-turvy spin because some of these things didn't make sense. I didn't understand the way the world worked, really. And I spent a lot of time trying to find meaning. And, I looked for meaning in religion. I looked for meaning in books. I looked for meaning in conversations and all kinds of things. Nothing really helped to get me back on my feet until one day I had this urge to draw. It was really something I hadn't done. I doodled in margins for years, but I hadn't really sat down and done a drawing since I was in high school. And so I went in and I drew the contents of my medicine cabinet. And when I did, it was like just an epiphany, a transformative experience. I suddenly felt anchored. I felt present. I felt clear. And it was sort of what I'd been seeking. And so that took me on this new path where I started carrying a sketchbook around with me and just documenting the world around me through drawing. And I did that. And I filled sketchbook after sketchbook after sketchbook. And eventually that became really the precipitating event that changed so much of my life. I mean, I would continue making art on the side like this when I was working in the advertising agency. I ended up writing a bunch of books while I was still in advertising. And a lot of them were about just this experience and about the transformative power of art and how to give yourself permission to do these sorts of things and why you should. And, that ultimately kind of built up more and more tension. I mean, at this point, I just had put out my 13th book. But when I left advertising, I'd probably written about 9 or 10 books. And, some of them have been, done really well. And there definitely felt like there was this other part of my life that was on the side. And then one day I just decided, you know what, I've been doing this in advertising. I've kind of gone as far as I can go with this. And let me just take a risk and step out and see what else I can do. Mm-hmm. And that's really where the fork in the road became, present.
First of all, thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's undeniably tragic. Can I ask how your wife is doing?
Well, she actually passed away 10 years ago. So she continued to be fine in the wheelchair for 15 years, and then she passed away after that.
You said you were looking for meaning. And I know this is I think it's a difficult question to ask and answer, but why was that important for you to find meaning in this?
I think I wanted security in a way. I wanted to know my place. I mean, I was a person I'd grown up in lots of different places. My mother had been married 3 times before I was 9. I had just grown up with a fair amount of chaos, and I wanted to be secure. I wanted to be rooted. And when my wife had her accident, the things that I thought were rooting me became transient, and I started to realize that I couldn't necessarily rely on externals like professional success or money or any of those sorts of things. I had to find something else that was what my life, that gave me meaning. And what I found with drawing was, it wasn't that the meaning that I found in my life was become an artist. That wasn't really it. It was more that I found beauty around me, and drawing showed me the beauty in the things that I already had. It
Mm.
showed me how everyday things are important. Um, and one of the first books I wrote was called Everyday Matters, and it has the kind of double meaning of, everyday mattering, but also the things I draw are just everyday things. Um, and I think I had never had any sense that that's what art could be. I thought that art was what you see in museums. I thought that art was about galleries and professionalism. I thought that art was about, the things that you see people make art about, whether it's sort of more traditional things, religious things, or um, portraiture, or if it's about the more conceptual things that modern art seems to be about. And none of those things were what I was looking for or capable
Mm.
of doing. So I kind of invented this thing that was really based around journaling, because I'm a writer. That's essentially who I am. And writing and drawing in combination is the thing that I love the most. So my books come out of my illustrated journals, where I do a drawing of a thing and I write about stuff, and I do sort of lettering and composition and things like that, which I picked up from advertising. And I make something that looks more than the sum of its parts.
How did Sketchbook Skool come about?
Well, so as I said earlier, at a certain point, I decided to leave advertising, and I ended up not sure what I was going to do. I had left, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do for a job. And I ended up intersecting with another artist in Europe. I was speaking at a conference in Amsterdam, and I met her, and we decided to form this business together that was around illustrated journaling and sketchbooks, which was a thing that 10 years ago, I think it's become much more of a common art form, but 10 years ago, it really wasn't. And I had published a couple of books that were collections of examples of people's illustrated journals and sketchbooks. It was about sketchbook art in hands of designers and illustrators and artists. So I knew a lot of people in that realm. And so she and I decided that we would just get some people who we knew together, and together we would all teach some classes. And this was kind of the beginning of online course making. And what I had seen of online courses hadn't impressed me very much. Again, I come from advertising. I've made Super Bowl commercials. I'm used to film at a certain level. I'm used to the quality of production, and I just wasn't seeing it. So I thought, well, we can bring, my partner had also been a photographer. So together we can like make art courses that look amazing. And that's what we did. And we also based the whole philosophy has always been about empowerment and permission rather than technique. Mm-hmm. So it's not just we're going to teach you how to use watercolors, which we do, but we're really going to help you to overcome the obstacles that have kept you from making art. And that's why as an adult, you're taking a class instead of making art on your own.
Yeah, I really resonate a lot with what you're saying and what you have on your website. I think one of the books you have has something to do with like art before breakfast or something like that, but for me, I went to art school, and when I was younger, art college for a year, and then I dropped out and started playing music. But I was one of those people who had parents. I mean, my father didn't really understand the value of it. My mom did, but I kind of moved towards needing to feel justified, needing to get the right job. And I really feel like my own creativity has suffered to this day. Yeah. I do. And that's, I think, like you're saying, a lot of people feel that way. How do we get back to it? How do we honor it? How can we justify it?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. I mean, I think the imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and associated things like procrastination, those are all things that come with the territory. I mean, I think you can be really successful as an artist and still encounter those things. But I think that the image I always have of sort of creative utopia is a woman in the kitchen cooking dinner and a 6-year-old sitting at the kitchen table with crayons drawing while she does. And that moment of, I just love doing stuff with kids. I've done a bunch of residencies in various schools, and you get a kids anywhere from the age of 4 to about 9, and their attitude towards making art is, first of all of them know they can do it.
Right.
They don't think that there's any particular purpose. You can go up to any one of those kids and say, "Oh, I love what you did." And they're not interested in what you have to say. And if you say, "We're going to go and hang it up on the wall," they're like, "Fine, whatever." And if you throw it in the trash, they'll probably never come back and say, "Oh, what did you do?" They're not attached to it, right? So what they do is they love doing it. They love having a box of crayons and having a blank piece of paper and making a world in it, and I think that is what I strive to get back to all the time, is just that feeling of the process of doing and not judging it while I'm doing it and not really caring about whatever's left over. To me, that's like the dirty plate after I ate the great meal. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because and that's what I love about sketchbooks, because sketchbooks they're personal, they're private objects that you hold in your hands. And, when you look at them, even if you look at somebody else's sketchbook, it's like one person at a time looks at it. It's not hanging on the wall. It's not trying to be decor. It's a private space that you go into that's a safe space. Because if you do a drawing and it's terrible, turn the page and then you can start all over again. And you might find when you go back and look at that page, the terrible one, that it wasn't terrible, that you were in a judgmental funk and you assessed it wrongly. But if you can just take this space, and the irony is I have people say, "I bought a really nice sketchbook and it's too nice to use." And I say, "Really? Like, how much did it cost? Did it cost like more than 2 lattes at Starbucks? I doubt it." Right. And yet you're like, "Oh, I don't want to ruin it." So I say, "Okay, open it in the middle and draw on that page, ruin it in the middle and just get on with it." And, and they say, "Well, what kind of pen should I use? What kind of blah, blah, blah." And I say, it doesn't matter. I mean, I spent the first couple of years of my drawing career, as it were, drawing with a Uniball pen that I stole from the supply closet at work and some Xerox paper. I mean, it doesn't have to be, there's no secret in any of that. It's just allowing yourself to do it. And, again, think like a 6-year-old, see what happens.
Why do we need, I have an 8-year-old, by the way. So,
you know what it's like.
What you're saying. Yeah, it's amazing. Why do we need to be empowered to get back to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's frustrating to me.
It is. It's frustrating, and you think about the world at large, that virtually everybody on the planet has gone through this. They've left behind this carefree, instinctive habit, and they've turned it into something that they self-flagellate with, or they stay away from and don't get the benefits from it. I think there's just so many things. I think part of it is, if you are a creative person and, if you hold on to your creativity through pre-adolescence and into high school, you might get funneled into you're one of the art crowd. You might get funneled down there, and, for better or for worse, you might also get funneled into you're not an art person. You might have one adult says to you, "That's not very good." Or you think that's good, it's not. I mean, I had a teacher who said to me once, that I had screwed up an assignment. It was just careless, thoughtless thing, but I still, 50 years later, can still hear it, And I think we're just sensitive to that. We're looking for understanding of our place in the world, and it's very easy to get disrupted. And I think for adults, they're afraid, if you go down this path, what if you just end up like, living in my basement because you can't get a real job, right?
Right.
And I don't want that to happen to you. So I'm going to steer you away from this thing. Even though you love doing it, I'm going to try and get you to do something more practical. And so it's just a lot of forces arrayed against it because it doesn't seem useful. So my purpose is to say, it's not useful. It's not useful. Don't look for it to be useful. But there's so many things we do that are fun that are not useful. watching Netflix, walking your dog, taking a nap, eating a cheeseburger. There's a lot of things that are pleasurable. You don't have to beat yourself up about doing them. So try and move it into that category, the same way again that you did when you were 5. So, yeah.
Yeah. The other aspect too is as you're talking, I'm thinking it, and I think this might be one of the reasons why a lot of us get hung up, is that it allows us to, in part, express who we are. And that can be, kind of scary, right? Oh my God, I'm showing this side of myself or this part of myself. And maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I'm going to feel or seem not just that I'm wasting my time or it's not useful, but people are going to judge me for what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But let's look at that more deeply. Like, there are millions of ways that we express who we are, from the glasses that you wear to the way you get your hair cut to who you hang out with to what kind of car you drive. There's a million ways that we try to distinguish ourselves from other people. Right. Now, for the last decade, people have been Instagramming their lives,
Yeah.
So what happened to that fear of judgment? And I think also there comes a point where you say, you know what? You're a grown up and you know that nobody else is thinking about you. Nobody else gives a shit what you're doing right. or what you've made, and they're not thinking about you. And yeah, maybe you'd like that to be that you're the center of the universe, but you're not. So nobody cares. Go and do it, or do it in a sketchbook, carry it in your bag, and keep it in a drawer, and nobody will ever see it. So what? People say to me, well, I could never draw in public. I'd be so terrified if somebody saw what I was doing. And I say, well, you could just go to a cafe and sit by the window and look, draw through the glass. Nobody would see you, or sit in a corner where your back is up against the wall. Nobody will see what you're doing. But I'll tell you, if anybody comes up and looks at what you're doing, 99.9% of them will say the same thing. I wish I could do that. That's what they'll say. No matter how crappy you think your drawing is, the fact that you're doing it is the point. And people will look at it and they'll say, yeah, like, did you take a class? How did you get to do that? How did you get to be so good? And you'll say, I'm not really that good. But the fact is, just the fact that you're doing it, everybody would like to be doing it. Just overcome that fear. I mean, you're a grown up. Take a minor risk. What's the absolute worst thing that can happen? Nobody's going to beat you up. Nobody's going to steal your money. What are they going to do to you? Some stranger who you don't know is going to have some issue with what you're doing in your own private time. You're not hurting anybody. And it's absurd. Right. And also, if they do have an issue with you, it's their problem.
Yeah.
They have obviously a deep-seated fear of their own creativity, and that's why it's coming out. And they're being competitive with you. So that's kind of the simple answer.
One of your books is titled "You Do You." Tell us about that.
You Do You is my newest book. I've been writing essays every week for the last 3 years or so, and this book, a lot of people who read my essays, they said, I wish it could be in a book form because I keep all the emails, and I wish that I could carry it around with me in a book. So I said, okay, fine, we'll get it made into a book. So that's the short answer for that. And I did some illustrations for it, and it's about, I don't know, 75 of the essays that I've written. But
and what are these essays on?
The stuff we're talking about.
Okay.
The creative process, creative empowerment, my own experience, my own struggles with it. In the end, virtually everything I've written has come out of my own experience. I wrote a book called Shut Your Monkey, which is about the inner critic. And I've always wrestled with the inner critic, and I really tried to understand it. So I did a lot of research, and I talked to a lot of shrinks, and I just tried to understand, where does it come from? What's causing it? How do we control it? Can we eliminate it? What is its purpose? And so I wrote a book about that. The book you mentioned before, Art Before Breakfast, is really about finding time. How, no matter how busy you are, you can find time to make art if you see it as something you can do in 5 minutes, which I believe you can. And if you do it in 5 minutes on a regular basis, soon you'll want to do it for more time because you love it. And that's fine too. But you don't But if you keep saying to yourself, one day I'll take a workshop, one day I'll rent a studio when my kids leave the house, when I retire, instead I say, just start it today and, spend 10 minutes before you eat breakfast doing it. Get up 10 minutes earlier and do a drawing of your shoe or your slumbering spouse or, something like that. Just start doing it. Find a place to fit it in. You can do it. And
So as we kind of wind down here, who is Sketchbook Skool for? Your online school?
Sketchbook Skool is really for anybody who we offer two things. One is courses on how to draw, how to paint, so forth, and various aspects of that. The probably more important part of it at this point is our Spark program, which is a membership program. We offer 2 to 3 hours of class every day. And it's really for people who just want to be with other people, to have an instructor, and to draw in a non-judgmental way, in a non-judgmental environment, to learn to do new stuff and to discover themselves and to develop a habit of drawing, watercoloring, painting and gouache, lettering, various other things. We have a writing program as well.
Oh, wow. So this is done all online?
All online, all on Zoom. And we record everything we do. So if you can't make it to something, you can always watch the recording. It goes into your library. So you end up with literally thousands of hours of live art classes to pick from.
Wow. Danny, man, super inspiring. I think what you're doing is amazing. And I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story, which I can't imagine going through what you did, but what you've birthed and what you're continuing to do is really inspiring. I just want to thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. And it was so great to talk to you. And remember, we've all gone through crap. We all went through a pandemic. We've all had stuff in our lives. That's why we should enjoy the rest of it. Don't let that stop you. Go and make art into a part of your life. It doesn't have to be all of your life. It doesn't have to be your job. It's just a fun thing to do. And you can start today.
There you go. What's the best way for people to learn more about you and what you do?
Well, I'd say probably the best way is to go to either DannyGregory.com or sketchbookskool.com. But also I do a weekly essay, which is at Danny'sEssays.com. And you can subscribe to that, and I'll send it to you every Friday for free. And also on YouTube, we have a really big YouTube channel, and I do video essays every week. And also I do a live drawing program. So it's called Draw With Me, and you can just come and we'll sit and we'll draw, shoes and I don't know, various stuff. So it's a really nice way to just hang out and do the kind of thing I'm talking about. And nobody will judge you.
Awesome. All right, man. Thanks so much for being here.
You bet. Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much for listening. And if you're interested to learn more about what I do, head on over to the Books Read Thrive Podcast.com. That's the Books Read Thrive Podcast.com. Take care.